If you don't speak, then you won't get spoken to. People only see you when you up, then they notice you. Trying to be a legend, create lines.
I feel like 2022 was the year of the GMT watch. Maybe it was because of COVID and reopening, but everybody from Rolex to Seiko to micro brands were just launching GMTs left and right. In fact, for my Wristy Awards video, I gave the Seiko 5 GMT the $500 award. But when I received this new Nodus Sector GMT, it has the same movement, it has the same price, and it really makes me think that the little Seiko is in trouble.
Notice you trying to be a legend, create lines is quotable. Only the real shall last, and I only know a few people when they feelings always acting emotional.
Hey guys, I'm Max and this is Watch Crunch. As a way to reward members of Watch Crunch who refer their friends to the platform, we designed this Watch Crunch NATO strap with our signature colors. And you can win this and a host of other prizes on watchcrunch.com in our new ambassador program. So come check it out. To be honest, up until recently, I haven't paid a lot of attention to Nodus, the Southern California-based micro brand. Their earlier watches just didn't really catch my eye. I felt like they got lost in a sea of micro brand diving style watches. But this all changed when they released their new Sector series. This line of watches includes the Sector GMT that I have here, as well as pilot and field style watches, all featuring dials that are divided into concentric rings, hence Sector. This new aesthetic looked interesting to me and really stood out from the pack. So let's take a deeper look at the Sector GMT, discuss why you might want to choose this watch over the beloved Seiko 5 GMT. Here we have the Sector GMT in its Pacific color. The dial is a striking deep turquoise that has a brushing pattern that gives off a pearly iridescence when the light hits it. A stubby orange GMT hand points at an inner ring that keeps track of 24 hours, whereas the 12-hour indexes are printed outboard. Note that rather than being all vertical, these numerals are instead radially oriented, with numerals above the midline having their base towards the center of the dial, and those below the midline with their base facing away. This not only is easy to read, but it also gives the dial a really cohesive sense of symmetry. I wish more watches would take this format. We get a color matched date wheel, which is inconspicuously placed at the 6, and the rest of the hands are done in white, with the minute and hour hands being perfect rectangular sticks. The Superluminova is quite strong, and sometimes I even catch it glowing in the shade even during the daytime. So if I'm to use one word to describe this watch, it would be fun. With most micro brands, I feel like you get a familiar design and a few alterations on top. Like, oh, that's a Submariner with a different bezel, or that's an Explorer with a different handset. But with the Sector GMT, you can tell that they started with a blank slate and developed something that looks nothing like what's already on the market, and you gotta respect them for that. And it's also just a fun design. They didn't go with some serious GMT master homage. Instead, they have little details like the inboard GMT display, a two-tone chapter ring with the bottom half having that same orange to mirror the GMT hand, and even a lighthearted font choice. And this all comes together to give us a watch that seems to say, let's go on vacation and don't make it a business trip. So the other thing that seriously impressed me about the Sector GMT was the case finishing. The bezel is radially brushed with super clean polished bevels on the top and the bottom. And the crystal must have a healthy helping of anti-reflection because it remains clear in the toughest conditions, especially for a flat sapphire. The rest of the case not only retains those sharp lines between polished and brushed surfaces, it's also full of sporty character. The lugs are tall and muscular and not an afterthought. In fact, they remind me a lot of the tall, skinny lugs found on Tag Heuer Carreras. But here we come to my first small criticism. The dial, it's recessed quite deeply into the case with a chapter ring that feels just a little bit too tall, meaning the hand stack isn't quite as compact as you see in a lot of luxury watches. Next, the case back is bulbous and it kind of prevents the case from laying super flat on your wrist. So when you're wearing the watch, it feels a little thicker than stated on paper. It's not a deal breaker, but it's just something I had to mention. But the case has a very distinct side profile and a large diameter crown with a lovely engraved logo. Most importantly, this crown screws down and gives us 100 meters of water resistance. My personal rule is that I don't go swimming with a crown that doesn't screw down. That was a gripe I had about the Seiko 5 GMT, and that little detail gives this watch another notch towards being the perfect vacation watch. So you can spec the Sector GMT with an optional bracelet. I chose the H-Link, which is lovely and has a quick release in-link, superb brushing, a nice taper, and screwed in links. Nodus has a proprietary clasp they call the Node X, which features a quick adjustment system. But unfortunately, the Node X clasp didn't impress me too much. I found the ratcheting mechanism not super solid, and it kind of inherits that Seiko disease of having a prominent lip when closed. So instead, I've mostly enjoyed wearing this watch on the original brown leather strap, which is nicely tanned, it's thick, substantial, and really picks up on some of the orange tones found on the dial. So the Nodus Sector GMT isn't perfect, but it gets a lot of the big things right. It uses the same collar GMT movement as the Seiko 5 GMT and is priced very similarly. So it begs the question, does it steal the Seiko's lunch? So let's apply my trademark 5 category crunch score and see who comes out on top. On design, the Seiko receives a 7. It's based on the classic SKX format, which some may find endearing and others find a bit played out. The Nodus, on the other hand, gets an 8.5 for being an original design that nails on symmetry, color selection, and just general proportions while still being fun and playful. On fit and finish, I'm gonna slightly revise up the Seiko 5 GMT score from a 5 to a 6. I think this SKX will get a 5, but with some updates like a crystal line bezel, applied markers, and solid end links, the Seiko 5 GMT deserves another point. The Nodus is another step above at 7. On movement, they obviously both get the same 5 points. The collar GMT movement is not a true GMT. It's called a 4R34 in the Seiko and an NH34 in the Nodus, but in reality, they're identical. On history, the Seiko name, of course, takes the cake at 8 points. And lastly, on value, I think they both receive a 9. So tallying it all up, the Nodus comes in at just a half a point behind the Seiko 5 GMT at 34.5. But despite the similarities, the numbers don't tell the full story. I think if you want a GMT with a well-recognized design and a well-known name on the dial, then you would obviously get the Seiko 5 GMT. But I really think the Sector GMT from Nodus is the better watch, and that's why I'd personally choose the Nodus over the Seiko. I just hope that Nodus continues to refine their clasp design, because with a strong bracelet clasp combination, I think the Sector GMT would have won hands down. But guys, which GMT watch is your favorite at the sub $500 range? Let's talk about it on watchcrunch.com. I'll put a link to a longer discussion in the pinned comments below. As always, stay crunchy. I'll see you in the next one.